Good evening, everybody. On this, our World Storytelling Day, we have a lot more people who've registered who haven't joined us yet. But because our first two storytellers are way far ahead, an hour ahead in Croatia, we want to start with them because they have to go and do a gig. My name is Liz Weir. I am a committee member of Storytellers of Ireland, which is the All-Ireland Storytelling Organisation. And this is our contribution as an organisation to World Storytelling Day. So tonight we present you with 12 people who are going to either tell a story or sing a song. And we're a very diverse bunch. Some of us aren't even broadcasting from Ireland. Some of us were not born in Ireland, but are living here now. So it shows actually a rich reflection of Irish society. The theme of World Storytelling Day is building bridges. People can interpret that whichever way they like, and some people might not even do anything. As I said, throw in an old bridge now and then even. But because our first two storytellers have to go on, it's my pleasure to welcome our first storyteller, who's Maria Gillan. This evening is conceived as storytelling from the 4 provinces of Ireland: Ulster, Munster, Leinster, and Connaught. And we have 3 people representing each of those 4 provinces. So of course, Maria will be delighted that Munster's up first. Maria Gillan is a storyteller based in Cork, but currently tonight in Croatia, where she has a gig, and she and Emer are broadcasting from there. So welcome, Maria, please take it away.
So thank you very much, Liz, and it's lovely to be here, and we're honoured. So we're in Croatia, which it has been sponsored by Culture Ireland. So we're delighted to be the guests of the lads in Split, and for the welcome from Culture Ireland. So just to say that there's a bridge between Croatia and Ireland tonight, and the story that I'm going to tell is a story of the woman that was the bridge between worlds. Her name was Bridget, and this story was told to me more than 50 years ago when I was in baby school in St. Patrick's, and you'll be meeting Paddy O'Brien soon, and he was a teacher there. So Mrs. Waldron told us this story. Once upon a time, there was a little girl, and her name was Bridget. And when she was born, the stars absolutely aligned. And her father, he was a Ceann Comhairle of his clan. He was a very powerful man. And her mother was a slave of this man. So there's another bridge, a bridge between high poverty and high riches. Well, in those days, it was acceptable for the man of the house, the man of the hour, to have more than one woman in his life. And his wife became very upset when she heard that the slave woman was going to have a child. She went out of her way to make sure that this child would never be born, and that the woman's life would be in danger. But a far faster, a wise man, it came to his attention in a dream, and he took all that was worth in him, and he brought this dream to his king. In those days, the Celtic people believed in dreams. When was the last time you listened to your dreams? Can you remember any of your dreams? Well, in his dream, he was told to tell the king to be careful, to mind this little child that would be born, that it would be a female child, so no threat to his wife, but that if he preserved the life of this child, that his name, Dufta, would be told in the stories millennia from that time. And so it is that I tell you this story, a millennia from the time that Bridget was born. Bridget was born in the middle, between 2 worlds, as her mother was leaving. So her father, to preserve the pregnancy and to preserve this woman, he said, you must leave, even though she was very near her time. And as she was walking out through the door, she put her hand to the lintel of the door and she held strong. And the pangs of childbirth came heavy and came fast. And it is said of that child that she was sneezed out and that it was an easy birth. And our Bridget grew. She grew in Caspy. She grew in wisdom. She grew in beauty. And by the time she was 8 years old, her father said that they were going Erna Leighton to Sarah Gogunta Kirky, that they were going on their holidays to Cork. But it was a very different Ireland in those days than it is today. The trees were growing strong and long and close together. And they would say that a red squirrel could climb a tree in Cork and not have to come down again to the ground until it reached the trees of Antrim. And so it was that they had to come on their Leighton to Sarah, their holidays, from County Louth. Now, in these days, with our fine roads, you'd make it in the matter of a few hours. But in those days, it was a real trip. And the women would pull their cloakas, like my cloaka here, along the carriages, and they would sleep under the carriages at night. And the men would sleep under the stars, or more probably under the rainy skies of Éire. And when they came to Cork, her father called her in and she said, "Hello, Dad." And he said, "No, from now on you must call me the Ceann Corla, for you are getting old in years. And from now on, even though I know you love to climb trees and that you run faster than the boys, and that with a bow and arrow you can hit a hazelnut from 300 feet. Now, if a man is 6 foot tall, how long is 300 feet?" And she could hit a hazelnut with her bow and arrow from that distance. But her father said, "From now on, you will wear a guna. You will learn to cook and be the nourisher." And she tried her best, but her heart was always wild and free. And it was in this time that Aspic Kirky came for a cup of tea at the back door. And Bridget's mum had heard that this was a new religion. And as he was telling her about the religion, she was falling a little bit in love with it. He says, in this new Christian religion, everybody loves one another. You must love yourself. You must love your neighbour. You must love God. And Bridget's mother said, "That's amazing. I think my daughter could be a great leader in this new religion." And he thought about that and he said, "Well, women can't hear confession. They can't give out communion. And because it's against the law for women to own the roof over their head, sure, they won't be able to do that either." And with this disappointment upon her heart, the door got flung open and Bridget came in and she took off her cloak and she threw it behind her and she sat there with her hands in her face and she looked into the face of Antaspic and she said, tell me about this new religion." And her mother said, "I don't think there's a place for you, Bridget." And it was at that moment that they saw the green coming up around the ears. They call that going green around the gills. And he was his eyes were wide open and his mouth fell open in shock. And when they looked around, they saw the reason for this. For when she took off her cloak and flung it behind her, it did not land on the hook. It did not land on the ground. Instead, it landed on a sunbeam. And as the sun made its way around her kitchen, her little kitchen, so did the cloak. And it had no arms and it had no legs and it was just moving around the kitchen. Well, he ran out that door with fright, but the seeds had been set that Bridget would be a leader, the bridge between worlds, the bridge between Severus, August being unbucked, between wealth and being very poor. She is now the bridge between us and those millennia ago, as we raise our drinks once more to Bridget in the year that she has become important to Ireland again.
Thank you so much, Maria. Thanks for getting us off to a great start, and wonderful to honour that very special woman in Irish mythology and in Irish life day to day. Thanks very much indeed. And all the best for your gig tonight in Croatia. For those that have just joined us, our first two storytellers are working tonight in Croatia. Maria is vacating the seat, and we go from Munster, we're going to Leinster now. This is Emer de Burke, who's living in the beautiful city of Kilkenny. And it's lovely that you've joined us, Emer. We'll put you onto the spotlight. Thanks.
I think I'm a bit small. Maria's taller than me on the chair, so I'm just trying to prop myself up. Thank you, Liz. It's just so lovely to be part of this event, even though we're far away. So let me get started. So this is, normally I tell Irish stories, but this is an Ndebele story from Zimbabwe. And it has the theme of building bridges. A long time ago, there was a very young man, a very, very handsome man, who had just gotten married to the most beautiful woman he had ever seen. He was so in love with her. She was absolutely beautiful. She was sweet. She was kind. She was very bright. And he did everything he could to make her happy. He would bring her tea in the morning. When he would go off hunting, he'd make sure he'd bring her back the best of meat. Anytime he got berries in the forest, he'd bring them back to her. He did everything he could to please her. And he wanted to spend as much time as he could with her. So their evenings were beautiful. Now, this young wife of his had a brother who was blind. And in order to impress his wife and please her even more, he invited his brother-in-law to go hunting with him. And the brother-in-law said, well, you do realize I am blind. I do not know the ways of hunting or the ways of the forest. But since you ask me, if you guide me, then I am happy to go hunting with you. So they arranged to meet the next morning at the edge of the forest. And the blind man got up and he knew his village well. He said goodbye to his own wife and he walked through the village. He managed to avoid the tree stumps and the big rocks, and he would be able to turn left and right and could find his way unto the edge of the forest. And there was his young brother-in-law waiting for him. And he took his brother-in-law by the elbow and they began to walk into the forest. Even though this man could not see, a whole magical world opened up to him. He could see in his inner eye all the trees, the colors, the textures. He could smell them. He could hear the song of the trees. And I'm not talking about the wind rustling through the leaves, but he could hear the songs of the trees as they sang to him in welcome. And he could hear the birds, and he could smell the flowers and smell the earth beneath his feet, and feeling the energy of the earth as it came up through his feet up into his body. And he'd look upwards to the sky and feel the sky energy as it came down through his head, filling his whole body with this wonderful magic energy. And then he said, oh, there's a fox. She's feeding her young. Ah. And they're playing around, and oh, there's a bird and she's just about to take flight. And the sighted brother is amazed. How can this man who's so blind and lives in such a dark world, how can he know these things? And he said to his brother, how do you know all this? And the blind man said, because I can see it, I can hear it, I can feel it. Don't you? The sighted man, no. All he was doing was focusing, following the path, looking out for a good place to lay their traps. And as they continued along the path, the blind man was telling him all the things he could sense and feel and hear. And this young man was very, very impressed with his blind brother-in-law. Eventually, they arrived at a place that was a good place to lay their traps beside a little stream. So the young man taught his blind brother-in-law how to lay the trap, and they set it down. And then he went further up the stream to set his own trap. This time, he disguised it. He laid lots of camouflage, leaves and twigs and branches so that the birds wouldn't see the trap. And he was thinking of getting home to his wife as fast as he could, looking forward to spending the evening with her. And he came back to the brother-in-law and he said, oh, I don't have time to help him disguise and lay camouflage over his trap. But he's blind, he won't know any different. And that's what they did. They headed back through the forest, back to their respective homes. And the next morning, the blind man left his house, said goodbye to his wife, walked through the village, avoiding the tree stumps and the rocks and going this way and that way until he got to the edge of the forest. And there was his young brother-in-law waiting for him. Again, he takes him by the elbow. They're going through the forest, and the blind man is telling him all the things he could sense and hear. And as they were getting close to where they'd laid the traps, he says, oh, we have birds. We each have birds in our traps. And the young man says, how can you know that? We're too far away, you can't see anything. He says, I can hear them. And they arrived where they lay their traps. And the young man went up to his trap first took all the camouflage off. And yes, the young man was so embarrassed. Oh, and so ashamed. I felt so bad. And he said, I have wronged you, brother. I had no right to do that. But I was just so keen to please my wife, and I knew she would love to make a hat of those beautiful feathers, but that bird is truly yours. And I know your wife would like to make a hat with those beautiful feathers. I have done you wrong, and I am so ashamed, and I am so embarrassed. I should never have treated you like that. I hope you can forgive me. And he put his hand into his bag and took out the colourful bird and gave it to the blind man, who took it in his hand, and he looked with his inner eye, and he rubbed its head and its beak, rubbed his hands down along the back and the wings. And he looked at his sighted brother-in-law and he said, thank you. And he put his hand in his own hunting bag, took out the little brown bird and said, this is your bird. And they each put their birds into their own bags, and they were silent again for a while. And then the blind man said, young man, I know there's something still bothering you, something still troubling you, you still have a question. And he says, I do. When people fight, how can they rebuild the bridges that have been broken? How can they rebuild the bridge of friendship after they have fought? And the blind man was quiet for a few moments, and then he looked his young brother-in-law in the eye, as if he could see right into his soul, and he said, people can build bridges of friendship after they've fought when they do just what you have done to me. Sinead.
Lovely. Thank you so much. Thanks, Emer. It's lovely. And we wish you and Maria a wonderful evening tonight in Split. I presume you're in Split or somewhere in Croatia. Anyway.
Absolutely, it's Split, yes.
Have a wonderful night for World Storytelling Day.
Thank you. It's just lovely to be so part of it. Enjoy the rest of your evening. And I'm so sorry I can't hear the rest of the tellers. Anyway,
all the
Slán,
very best. Bye-bye. You are. At the beginning of the night, I mentioned that this evening it was conceived by the Committee of Storytellers of Ireland, our all-Ireland storytelling organisation. 10 years ago was the first World Storytelling Day, and one of our committee members, Daria Walsh, suggested that we get involved. And so I'm delighted that she's with us tonight from, I think, County Offaly, to say a few words. So you'll hear Daria isn't Irish born, but she's very much part of our storytelling community. Welcome, Daria.
Thank you very much, Liz. And first, I want to thank everybody for attending. I want to thank all the storytellers that are taking part in World Storytelling Day, no matter where you're doing it. I launched our 10th year this morning in my hometown of Clara, at the Clara Library with the students from St. Bridget's and St. Francis. I then went on to Tullamore Library, where I told to the students of St. Philomena's, and they regaled me with some of their tales. So it was a wonderful event. And as Liz said, it was my idea that we get involved in World Storytelling Day. And I think more than anything else, I'd like to say kind of a mention for two people. For my dear friend, the late Brendan Nolan. He was my friend and he was my mentor. And he's the one who nominated me first for Storytellers of Ireland for the committee. And when it was very widely seconded, I was a bit blown away. But Brendan had said to me very wisely, prepare before you go to the first committee meeting. He said, have a project that you want and know what you want, know why you feel it's important. So I did exactly that. I thought to myself, because as you can tell by my accent, I am most definitely not born here, but I'm of Irish descent, and storytelling growing up for me and my family was a very important part of passing down our culture. And in a lot of ways, while I was preparing for this, I couldn't get out of my head the song Bridge Over Troubled Waters. Now, that song, my nanny loved that song so much that she had it sung in her funeral. And I just couldn't get that out of my head. But I realized why. That's what storytelling is. That's why, as a person of Irish descent, but growing up in America, there was so much culture passed down to me through stories. And a story, as I explained to the kids today, is very much like a bridge. If a stone or an element of that story falls down, so does the bridge, and the connection is broken. So if a storyteller doesn't have a listener, then that bridge is not going to go on. And so I would not have had all of those stories if it wasn't for my nanny and Jonathan giving me a seat at the table, and it wasn't for them believing in such a passionate way that my parents believed in a passionate way, and that storytelling was a really important thing around the kitchen table and at events, and something that was cultured. And that's why I'm just so passionate about it. And that's why at the first committee meeting, I said, goodness gracious, this is what we should be doing. Why isn't Ireland one of the countries with such a well-known, rich tapestry of stories? So much so that the diaspora, who are engaged in their own ethnic culture, are engrossed in storytelling. It is that rich. It's like it flows through our blood. So I said we should be part of this, and that's why I was passionate about it. And I have to also applaud Brendan Nolan, because in the early days of trying to put this forward, not everybody was on board. And there's also the idea of trying to kick off a brand new festival and get everybody on. I have to acknowledge Liz Weir from day one has been on with World Storytelling Day. We've always had major contributions from Ulster. So kudos to that province, has always been there for World Storytelling Day. And I think that's down to Liz. But Brendan was the one kind of pushing behind me. And the other person also not with us tonight is my own mother, who was so proud of Ireland's participation in World Storytelling Day as my project. And she was the one who was who had just instilled that, one of the people that instilled it so strongly in me. And so I don't think I'd be a storyteller if it wasn't for her. So I have to mention them. So I brought it to the committee and we got going. Now our first event was 10 years ago. And 10 years ago, I also launched it in the morning in a school. I was teaching at St. Louise de Marillac. And I told all day in classrooms and in the hall. And I then had my writers group and from the school completion program do storytelling as well. And then myself, Catherine Brophy, the late Brendan Nolan, Jack Lynch, and Nuala Hayes all told at Cleary's Tea Rooms, which is now no longer with us, but it was meet me under the clock at Cleary's, which loads of people would have been saying. And, as we go on and on, here we are 10 years later, and it
people
has
from all over the world, Daria. With people from all over the world with us tonight, which is really good.
With people from all over the world, which to me, that's just so perfect. On World Storytelling Day, we're reaching out and everyone's reaching in. And it's like 1,000 bridges going in 1,000 directions. And every story that gets told tonight is heard by all of those ears. And the listeners will hopefully take them to their heart and retell them again. And the bridge won't be broken.
Thank you. I hope you're very proud of what you started, Daria. And I remember those under the clock at Cleary's was brilliant. That was a really good thing because that's where courting couples used to meet there,
Yes.
So thank you very much. I hope you're enjoying listening to some of the people. Some of these people you'll know well and some of the people you won't. So thank you very much. We'll remove you from the spotlight so you can just ease off and enjoy your evening.
Thank you.
We will just say to you that because Storytellers of Ireland is a charity, we have a donations button, which I'm going to post in the link. If anybody feels moved to support the organisation, that's there. We're going to move up the country now to the province of Ulster, which is where I live. But we're going to the southern part of that. We're going to one of our committee members, Francis McCarran, who regularly hosts online events. And it's lovely to have him here telling stories. So over to you, Francis.
Thanks very much, Liz. It's an honour to be here tonight sharing stories. And whenever I went to look at the stories that I'm telling, and I looked to see had I a story about a bridge, I had none. And I was going to sit down and whinge about it, but my sister-in-law's mother would always tell them when they were children, you know, what are you whinging about? Build a bridge and get over it. So that's what I've done for you tonight. I've built a little story with a bridge in it. So I hope you like it. It's the first time I've told it. So I hope it's not too rusty. John McCara, the school teacher, regretted giving the children the homework of the bridge. But the end of the school day bell had sounded, spilling the children out into the sunny freedom of a Friday afternoon, and it was too late now. It was nostalgia that had made him do it. The picture of a bridge on the textbook on his desk had brought into his mind his old school teacher's voice, old Master Murray saying, I want you to write about your favourite bridge that you have crossed and tell me what it's built of. And hearing that voice in his head, John was instantly back in his boyhood. Flying down a hill, the freewheel of the bicycle clicking in his ears, the wind in his hair, as he went up and over the humpback bridge at Scottstown, shouting hello to old Father Kirk, the parish priest, who was fishing off the parapet, leaning on the limestone wall with his pipe in his mouth, his hat on his head, and the aroma of Mick McQuaid plugged tobacco incensing the air all around. And that's what had made John say to the children in his fourth class, I want you to write about the favourite bridge that you have crossed, and I want you to tell me what it's built of, and I'm going to ask you to tell your story out loud on Monday, and there'll be a prize for the best story. And then that bell had sounded the end of day. And as it did, it sounded another bell inside John's head, an alarm bell. What the hell had he been thinking? When he was in fourth class, money was scarce, but money was scarce for everybody. And when Master Murray had asked them to write about crossing their favourite bridge, his 27 classmates, white-faced and Irish like himself, had all done just that. Master Murray had listened to 27 stories of crossing an interesting bridge that was the same bridge for the whole lot of them, the bridge in Scottstown. And here he was now, a school teacher in Monaghan Town, who had moved from the era of chalk and talk to educating a fourth class that looked like a mini United Nations, and using white smart boards and newfangled technology to do it. The only thing that was the same between his day and now was that in some households, money was still scarce. There was wee Mickey McEnany there at the back of the class. Both his parents dead in an accident. He lived with his granny and his Auntie Eileen. And the only bridge that Mickey would have crossed was another humpback bridge at Ballyalbany. And he'd have crossed that coming into school every day. And others were in the same boat. And whenever the children would reveal the favourite and interesting bridges they had crossed on Monday, that gap between the bridges that some had crossed and the bridges that others weren't able to would be laid bare.
Now, is that
And
not
the
story time?
poverty of some households would be visible to all. What had he been thinking? And as for your man sitting beside Mickey, God knows what bridges Vladimir Sapozhnikova had crossed to get to Monaghan from Ukraine. The first day he came into the classroom, Mickey had latched onto him, even though the lad didn't speak a word of English at all. And then there was other children in the classroom from Syria, from Africa. And maybe they wanted to forget the bridges that they had crossed. Maybe this assignment would drag up bad memories. So what the hell had he been thinking, setting them such an assignment? Monday came around and the children started to tell their stories. Bridges unfolded in brick and concrete and steel and stone. Mary Duffy had crossed the Tower Bridge in London and seen it open up to let a ship go up the river when she was on her holidays. Another lad was over the Golden Gate Bridge in San Francisco. It's made of steel, sir. Children had crossed the Brooklyn Bridge, the Orson Bridge, the Bridge of Sighs in Venice. For God's sake, there was even one lad had crossed the bridge on the River Kwai when he was on his holidays with his family. And at every exotic bridge crossed, John could see Mickey's head dropping lower and lower and lower at the back of the class. Ballyalbany Bridge wouldn't be much competition for these. Vladimir, beside him, had his head down all the time as well, and John called on him to share his story. Without looking up, the young fella said, "Favourite bridge is bridge over River Dnipro. Mother says bridge to freedom. I like to cross this bridge away from bombs." And then he looked up and he said, "I hate this bridge because father still on the other side fighting." More bridges unfolded. Celeste Malacca, third generation Italian, John remembered her grandfather coming to town to sell ice cream. Her favourite bridge was in Rome, the St. Angelo Bridge, with the angels on it. And she said in her best Monaghan accent, "My dad says the Romans built bridges with a keystone in them, and if you take out that keystone, the whole bridge would fall apart." And then it was Mickey's turn. He was the last one to tell. And John hoped that when he called on him, he would be able to make Ballyalbany Bridge sound interesting. "Mickey, would you like to tell us your tale?" But to John's surprise, Mickey never mentioned Ballyalbany Bridge at all. "Sir, my favourite bridge is the one my granny's building, and she's the keystone." Well, the whole class exploded in laughter. The thoughts of Mickey's 76-year-old granny holding the whole bridge together on her own. But Mickey, even though he reddened a bit, he kept going. He says, "One night, sir, my Auntie Eiley couldn't mind me, and Granny goes out every Tuesday night to build bridges. And she said, 'Will you come with me tonight, son, because there's a wee fella I want you to stay with.' And we went into the YWCA building in Monaghan Town, the Young Women's Christian Association. They're all Protestants, sir. But Granny says, 'Sure, what of it? As long as you're a decent person, doesn't matter what you are.' Well, we went to the upstairs room there, and there was tables and chairs and people sitting around them. And Granny gave me a deck of cards and she says, 'You go over to that wee fella there and I'll put out the cards for the other table.' Well, the master exploded in laughter himself now. He said, 'Mickey, your granny wasn't building bridges. She was playing bridge. It's a card game.' But Mickey shook his head. 'No, sir, she was not, because when we were walking home, she said to me, "I'm very proud of you, son, for building a bridge tonight." And I said, "Granny, I wasn't building any bridge. Sure, I had no blocks or concrete or anything. All I was doing was talking to that wee fella there, and he doesn't have a word of English." And Granny said, "That's why you were building a bridge. The people in that room tonight, they've come from all over the world, Africa, Asia, Eastern Europe, and all those people, Mickey, have one thing in common. They're stuck on one side of a river and they need a bridge to get them across to our side. And I got my friends here to help them. We're building that bridge with warm words and kind smiles and a friendly nod. And we're cementing it all together with tea and biscuits. And every word of English they get is a brick in that bridge that brings them to our side. And I think that's why my granny's a keystone, because if she wasn't there, the whole thing would fall apart." Well, Master John the Cara had a twinkle in his eye as he thanked all the children for their stories and gave Mickey the prize for best tale. And he also secretly thanked his old schoolmaster, Master Murray, whose voice had reached across the biggest bridge of all from the other side to give the kids the best assignment that he had ever set them.
Brilliant. Oh, Francis, we can always rely upon you to go the extra mile to create a story to suit the occasion. And wouldn't that be a great exercise to do with the class? I know Francis is a storyteller with Monaghan, in residence with Monaghan Libraries, apart from his day job. And I know he's been working with kids from very mixed multicultural backgrounds, many children from all different backgrounds in Monaghan. So thank you very much for sharing that, Francis. Terrific. I told you we're a diverse bunch. We're coming up a wee bit further north in Ulster, and we're going to a townland called Omerban. And in that townland, there's an unusual person who didn't start her life in Northern Ireland, started it in Tokyo, Japan. And I told you we're going to have some music tonight as well as some stories. So would you please, everyone, welcome Masco Carey.
Hello, good evening, everybody. Oh, I love that story, Francis, and my story kind of relates to that. Well, who would have thought a person from Tokyo, Japan? Well, when I was born or when I was 20, I never imagined I would be coming to live in Northern Ireland, becoming storyteller, and building a bridge between Japan and Ireland. But what a wonderful job I have. And as many of you know, storytellers and the others, a story can work in different ways to build bridges. But I feel that being Japanese in Northern Ireland add some more to it. The reason behind is because a lot of people, especially in the countryside and country town, village, many of the children, many of adults, never really dealt with any foreigners, people non-Irish. And I think the biggest wall between the people are unknown. So when they don't know, they get scared. They don't know them. And they become defensive. But here I am, storyteller, sometimes wearing kimono, and go into school, go into community, smiling, and just me being there, start to open the door, the bridge is built. And then as I speak, as I explain about Japan, as I tell stories, the bridge get wider and wider. And by the end, the size of the bridge is different individually, but it is there to open up more bridge for people to understand the other people in different circumstances, not only foreign people. So I love my job for that. I think storytelling is wonderful. And I'm also recently passionate to tell a story about Hiroshima and Sadako stories as well. This is to build bridge for peace. I hope it helps to people to be aware that using atomic bomb third time is just not happening. So I'm hoping by me spreading this bridge wider and wider will help to that. And speaking of peace, what is one of the best way to do is music. And I didn't realize, but quite a lot of songs that I knew was from Ireland. And one of them was Danny Boy, everyone's favorite. And I would like to sing first English, then Japanese and English. And Japanese part, the translation is, my dear child, Danny Boy, where do you sleep tonight? Do you have a place to rest your body, the tired body from war? I think of you, and my heart aches, and I have sleepless nights. Oh, Danny boy, my dear child, please come back to this elderly mother. Here go. Oh, Danny boy, the pipes are calling. From glen to glen, sound down the mountainside. The summer's gone, and all the roses falling. It's you must go, and I must bide. But come ye back when summer's in the meadow, and all the valleys hush and white with snow. I'll be here in sunshine and in shadow. Oh, Danny boy, I love you so. Oh, Danny boy, 愛しの我が子よ。今宵はどこに眠る。戦に疲れた体を休める術はあるか。お前に心痛めて眠れぬ夜を過ごす。老いたるこの母の胸におたにぼいおたにぼい帰れよ。But when you come and all the flowers are dying, if I am dead, as dead I well may be, you come and find the place where I am lying, and kneel and say an Ave there for me. And I shall hear the soft dew tread above me, and all my grave will warmer, sweeter be. For you will bend and tell me that you love me, and I shall sleep in peace until you come to me.
Oh, beautiful, Masako. Beautiful. Thank you so much. Oh, it's not easy sitting in a room all by yourself singing to a square box, you know. Thank you so much. That was lovely. I always say that storytelling is the original World Wide Web that connects us, and you're a good example of that. Beautiful. So thank you very much. Now we are going to the province of Connaught, but via France, because Fiona Dowling normally lives in Mayo, but she's over in France for a while, And it's lovely to have you with us, Fiona. You're an hour ahead of us. So let's hear what you have to tell us.
Hi, everybody. It's lovely to be here for World Storytelling Day with you. So, yes, I was born in Ireland. I've got a French accent. Usually I shy away from telling Irish stories because I'm shy about putting my French accent on them. But today I will be brave and I will tell an Irish tale. So, if my phone allows me, if my phone stays in place. All right. So, a long time ago in Connemara, there was a man living with his 3 daughters. Now, the mother wasn't living with them because she had died when the girls were still quite young. But the father was at the same time a father and a mother to those girls. He cooked for them, he fixed their clothes, told them bedtime stories, sung for them, but also taught them how to ride a bicycle and even fix a bicycle. And they lived very happily all together, the 4 of them. And there was a particular moment of the day that was the girls' very favorite moment. And that was after they had dinner, the father would grab an instrument. Could be a fiddle one day or a flute another day, tin whistle, and he would play music. And the girls would just dance around the kitchen and dance and dance and dance. And that was their moment of joy and pleasure and communion with their father. And it so happened that on this particular day my story takes place, well, the dinner was very quiet. Father wasn't saying a whole lot. And then when dinner was finished, the father stood up and he said, "Girls, I am so sorry. There's not going to be any music tonight. I'm just not feeling well. I'm just going to go to bed." So he turned around and walked slowly to his room and closed the door. The girls were so disappointed. And so they looked at each other across the table. "Daddy's sick. What can we do?" And one of them said, "What would Grandma do?" "Oh, I know. Grandma would make him that drink, with the rum. Let's make one." So the 3 of them got organized. One got the glass, the other one got the water to boil, the other one got the rum, and they started. They put that much rum, generous hot water. What else can we put in? Some lemon, sure. Sugar, add some sugar, loads of it. "All right," said the older sister. "Who's going to bring it to Dad?" Me, said the youngest one. So very carefully, she had this hot drink wrapped in a tea towel, and she knocked at the door and said, Daddy, we've got something for you." And Dad opened the door, was very touched to smell a hot rum, and he took it, thanked his daughters, and went to bed. Now, everybody slept that night, but the girls were really anxious to know the following morning if their dad was feeling better. And they had a great surprise when they walked into the kitchen and saw the dad standing there stirring the porridge. And so the oldest daughter came to him and said, "Did the rum do?" And then the middle daughter said, "Did the rum do that?" And then the little one said, "Did the rum do, Daddy?" And the father cracked a big smile and he said, "Did the rum do? Did the rum do? Did the rum do, Daddy? Did the rum do? Did the rum do? Did the rum do, Daddy? Did the rum do? Did the rum do? Did the rum do, Daddy? Did the rum do? Did the rum do? Did the rum do, Daddy? Did the rum doodle? Did the rum doodle? I diddly idle them. Did the rum doodle? Did the rum doodle? Did the rum doodle? Da rum. Did the rum doodle? Did the rum doodle? I diddly idle them. Did the rum doodle? Did the rum doodle? Did the rum doodle? Da rum. Did the rum do? Did the rum do? I diddly idle them. Did the rum do? Did the rum do? Did the rum doodle me torture? Did the rum do? Did the rum do? I diddly idle them. Did the rum do? Did the rum do? Did the rum doodle me torture? Well, they danced and danced and danced all around the kitchen and all day long. They even missed school. And they say they are still all dancing to this day.
Oh, perfect. Merci. Really, really lovely. Thank you. See, combining stories and music, all good. Wonderful. Thanks very much, Fiona. Lovely to have you with us. Hopefully we'll see you before too long. Thanks very much indeed. All the way from France. From France, we are going to Tipperary. Sure, we're better. And our next storyteller is Vincent Kiley. Again, frequent guest he was at Cork Yarn Spinners. He was in Bray telling stories, and now he's with us tonight. Welcome, Vincent. Do you unmute yourself and
Yeah.
we'll be all set?
So,
Brilliant.
hello to everybody from all over the place. I'm going to tell you a story from a time when I lived in London, which was about 20 years ago. If you ever travelled from Stansted Airport into London City, you would do that by motorway called the M11. And as you come close to the city, you'll notice probably over your head a series of footbridges. Well, I built those footbridges, but not on my own. I had a lot of help. And it was actually a really nice job and a really happy job because there were people working there. It was sort of like tonight. There was people from all over the world working on that job. And my favorite people on that job were 3 engineers. 2 of them were from the ancient land of Kashmir, far, far away from London. And 1 was from Ecuador, also very far from London, and the opposite side of the world from the other 2. And they were really, really nice guys. But on some very cold, wintry nights that I remember, because a lot of the work was done at night, we used to hear stories from them from all over their places. And the guy from Ecuador was called Caesar. So all the Irish guys very quickly, when they would meet him, would always greet him with "Hail Caesar," which was like from the movies. And he didn't mind at all. He laughed at it. But anyway, we were there one night and building these bridges, and he told us a story that he remembered from a bridge building event, sort of in his own world. And he told us a story about, he came from a village very close to the jungle in Ecuador. And when he was about 10 years old, now this would have been about 1950, when he was about 10 years old, a guy came there from the United States to study the tribes of the area. There were still tribes in the jungle at that time, which had been undiscovered and who were called lost tribes at that time. And he was a linguist, this man, and his interest in them was more so got to do with checking out what languages they had and how they related to the languages of other places. And he used to go off into the jungle for months at a time. But anyway, after about a year or 2, he actually did discover a tribe in there. They lived at the far side of a gorge, and there was a rope bridge across the gorge, which really hadn't been used for years and years. It was hanging on by a thread. But he crossed the rope bridge somehow, and he got over to the other side. And when he encountered the people, they were actually really nice people. There was no problem. They treated him really well. They accepted him and took him in, basically. So he was there for several weeks, the first trip, and he realized that the language was actually, he could understand it fairly well. And he communicated with them and he learned a lot of stuff from them. And over the next couple of years, he made several trips into the place. And each time he learned more and more from them and got better at their language. Anyway, after maybe his 4th or 5th trip, they were talking one day and they asked him about the place where he came from. And he came from the prairies in the United States. And he explained to them that it was a big open land with, as far as the eye could see, no trees, just grass and very little else. Well, they couldn't believe how different it could be, and they were a bit taken aback. But eventually, he left again. And on his next trip, when he returned, he realized there was a big difference in the people. They didn't seem as excited to see him, and they were a bit more withdrawn, and he knew something was wrong. So eventually they came to him and they said, listen, the last time you were here, why did you tell us that? You told us untruths, lies. That couldn't be possible, that you came from a place like that. Where do you really come from? And he said, no, it's really true. The place I come from, there are no trees. It's just grass and farmland. And they were completely baffled by this. And he noticed a big change. And actually, the more he tried to persuade them that's where he came from, the less they believed him. And they said, listen, there is no way that a man could live in a place where there are no trees. That would be impossible. How could there be animals? How could there be birds? How could the insects live? How could anybody live in a place like that? They thought, you're definitely telling us lies. And the more he talked, the less they believed him. And eventually, they actually hunted him out of the place. And they hunted him back over the rope bridge and told him not to come back. And as he looked behind him, they were actually cutting down the rope bridge. So he went back to the village where my friend Cesar was from, and eventually back to the United States. And he didn't really tell anybody about his trip or his experiences for about another 25 years. But it was another 40 years before anybody encountered that tribe again, when they emerged from the jungle themselves and voluntarily mixed with the locals. So that would have been about the time when we were building those bridges in London. That's how Cesar came across the story, I suppose. So the next time that you're passing in from Stansted Airport to London, when you get near the city, near the Olympic Stadium, look over your head and you'll see some nice red, orangey footbridges, 6 of them. And remember that tribe, I suppose, and remember Cesar. And what a nice guy he was, and what a great storyteller he was. So, hail Caesar.
Thank you very much. That's linked us now with South America as well, all around the world tonight. Thank you so much, Vince. That was great. We're now going to Leinster. It's my pleasure to welcome Nuala Hayes, former chair of Storytellers Ireland, founder of Skeltahona, wonderful storytelling festival that used to happen in Dublin, now touring with a wonderful show about Peg Sayers. Welcome, Nuala. Lovely to have you with us. Presume you've had a busy day.
Thanks, Liz. Can you see me?
Absolutely, yes, indeed.
Very good. Yeah, it's lovely to be here, and what a multicultural night. Yeah, I had a busy day. I was down in Kilkenny with Peg Sayers stories, but of course, at the back of my mind, I was thinking, oh, tonight is the night for stories about bridges or building bridges. So things were going round in my head, and I was, oh, what'll I do? Like everybody else, what'll it be? And as it happened, where we had our performance, we were crossing over a bridge to the River Court Hotel, and the river underneath. I said, what's the name of that river? And she said, the River Nore. And I said, ha, that's it. So I'd like to tell you a story that I haven't told for quite a while. It was one of the stories that I came across when I was working in County Laois, which is in the Midlands of Ireland, but it's on the eastern side, the ancient Irish East, as we call it now. But County Laois is there. It's a doesn't touch the sea at all, but there are 3 rivers go through it: the Barrow, the Nore, and the Suir. But the biggest one that goes through Laois is the River Nore. And along the River Nore, there is a place, beautiful place, called Shanahoe. Lots of signs to it. And Shanahoe, the word Shanahoe in Irish is Shan-Aw, the old ford. But this is the story of how the bridge there got its name. In the olden days, well over 100 years ago, there was no bridge there, but there was a ford, or a footstep, as they called it, over the river. And was very common. That's how people passed over the river, because it was quite shallow, and they might bring their animals across. They'd do normal crossing there, and there weren't many houses around, but there was one particular house, a small little house, which belonged to Neil and Kathleen O'Shea. Now, they were fine, down-to-earth people, but they were well used to being woken up at night, particularly on a bad night, by somebody who would get stuck on the ford and they'd have to be rescued. And Kathleen in particular, she always went to sleep with a little bit of an ear cocked. And one particular night, it was a wild, windy night, and she thought she heard a sound from the river. So she said to her husband, get up, there's somebody in trouble on the river. So Neil gets up, as he usually does, on with his coat and the big stick, and out he goes into the darkness. Anybody there? Sure enough, he heard a voice saying, help. Well, he got himself together. He was well used to this. He knew his footsteps well, and he stepped across the river at that point, and he could see a human being clinging on to the grass at the edge of the bank at the other side. So he leaned over when he got to him, and he lifted him up on his shoulder, fine strong man he was, and he brought him back to the house where Kathleen was up, and she had the fire lighting, and put him sitting down, and they had to look at him. Curious first, they didn't want to disturb him. Now, he was a tall man, and he had long pale face, but they thought he was probably quite young. His trousers were torn, and in the tear in the trousers they could see he had a wooden leg. But the most notable thing about him was a big leather hat he had in his head. It stayed on his head, but underneath the hat was a kind of a nightcap, a red flannel nightcap. You know, there was no hair visible at all, just the big hat on top of it. Kind of curious. So after he had the cup of tea, they asked him about himself, and he told them that he was travelling the roads, that he was originally from the north of Ireland, but he'd run away as a young lad. He'd run away to sea at about the age of 16, and he'd joined a ship, but he'd had a bit of a mishap on the Bay of Biscay. He was in a fight with pirates, and didn't he lose his leg? And a one-legged sailor, no use to anyone. So he had to take to the roads, and he had to travel from that time on. And he traveled the roads and make whatever bit of money he could, but his luck had almost run out that night when he was pulled out of the river by Neil O'Shea. So they gave him, decent people that they were, they gave him the bed for the night. They had a little room at the back. They had just one son, so there was plenty of room, put him to sleep at the night. And the next morning, when he got up, Kathleen said, you know, you've had a hard old life. Why don't you stay here for a while with us? And you could do worse than go down to the ford there, sit there, because there's lots of people passing by, and the people here are decent people. You know, they might give you a few bob. So that's what he did. He went down to the ford, and he'd sit on a stone, and he'd take the leather hat off his head, and he'd ask for a few bob for the good of people's souls. And after a while, people got used to him there. And, you know, it's just a bit like here where I live at the moment near Euston Station. You kind of get used to the same people sitting on the bridge with the hand out, and you give them a few bob. People got used to him and got to like him. And they used to call him the Baccha Rua. Bacach, because he had a wooden leg, he was crippled. He'd hobble along, and Rua because he was never seen without the red nightcap on his head, and of course the other hat that he'd have out. But people wondered, you know, he was given a lot of money, but nobody ever saw any evidence of it. And if it wasn't for Kathleen feeding him every day, sure, he wouldn't have had anything to eat at all. And if anybody asked him, what do they do with your money? He'd say, I've no money, I've no money. He was very defensive. Anyway, time passed, and Neil died, and even though he was dead, Kathleen says there'll always be a bed for you here. And he kind of had become part of the family. But one particular morning, the son, whose name was Terry, realised he was usually up early in the morning, went into the bedrooms to see him, and there he was on the bed. Terry said to him, what's wrong with you? And he says, oh, I'm dying, Terry, I'm dying. I won't get up out of bed at all. Terry said, will I get a doctor for you? A doctor, he says, I've no money to pay a doctor. Terry thought to himself, what a mean old stinger he has. He has to have money somewhere. Will I get a priest for you? I haven't said a prayer for years, he says, don't bother. And then he turned, are you sure you don't want a doctor? I don't. And he turned his face to the wall, and he died. So, decent people they were. A lot of the neighbours knew him. They gave him the big funeral. All the neighbours came, and they remembered him. And everybody was saying, what did he do with his money? Where is his money? I suppose the O'Sheas have it. And if they didn't have it then, they have it now. But of course, the O'Sheas knew different. And that night, after they had buried him, they went to bed. And neither of them, either the mother or Terry, could sleep a wink that night, because all night there was a banging all over the house. And Terry came down in the morning, his eyes huge. And the mother says, God, I didn't sleep a wink either. Do you know, I think the spirit of that old baka is in the house. The spirit isn't resting. Do you know, Terry, said the mother, it could be that we buried him with a knot or a tie somewhere on the burial clothes, because it was a tradition that if you buried somebody with a knot or a tie, the spirit wouldn't rest at all. Go on down to the grave quietly and see, is there, just check out, is there any chance that there was a knot or a tie on his burial clothes? So Terry wasn't too keen about this, but he decided he'd give it a go. And he went down, and it was a moonlit night, and he walked down, and the only sound were of his feet crunching on the gravel. And he went over to the new grave, and he knew that it was common in those days. They didn't really screw the top of the coffin too tight, and it was just covered over with gravel. Very simple kind of a burial. And he scraped the barrel. He scraped the gravel off the top of the coffin, and he unscrewed it and lifted the top off the coffin, and the moon shone down on the dead man's face. And he thought, oh, sure enough, underneath the cap, he thought he saw something glinting. So quick as a flash, he reached down and he grabbed the cap off the baka, and then he put the top of the coffin back on, covered it with the gravel, and the cap seemed to be a bit of a dead weight. He put it in his pocket, and he walked up to the mother, who she was up then, and she was waiting for him to come in. He says, mother, he says, I think I know where the baka's money is. And they looked at the cap, and the mother couldn't believe it. She got herself a little bit of a knife, a scissors, and she clipped the lining of the nightcap that he was wearing. And sure enough, hadn't the baka sewn carefully into the nightcap, there was 100 golden guineas. That was the currency in those days. And that was a fortune in those days. Well, they were delighted with themselves, and they thought they had a right to that money. After all, they'd looked after him all the years of his life. So they went to bed that night happy out. And Terry was thinking, God, there was a girl up the road that he really fancied, and he'd be able to approach her now. And the mother was thinking they could put a new roof on the house, and it was grand. Well, if they had a bad night the previous night, that night was absolute pandemonium. The banging around the house, and the cat was screeching, the dog was barking, even the cups fell off the dresser, and the ashes were all over the place down next morning. And Terry said, this is desperate. We can't sleep in this house. This old baka must be haunting us. What are we going to do? And the mother said, listen, it must be the money that's here. We have to get rid of it. Go and take it away as quick as you can. So they wrapped it up in the mother's apron, and Terry went off as fast as he could to the parish priest. And the priest was still in bed. It was early morning. He climbed up the steps into the bedroom, and he put the hat and the money at the bottom of the priest's bed and said, there you are, Father, you take that money. I want nothing to do with it. Walked off down the stairs. The priest said, come back here. What are you doing? He said, that money belonged to that old baka, that old miser, and it's cursing us. Keep it. And the priest said, oh, he wasn't going to keep it in the house. So next morning, he had it wrapped up in a parcel, and it was sent off by courier, which was on horseback, off to Maryborough, as it was called. Nowadays, the town is called Portlaoise, and it was sent to the Secretary of the Queen's Council Grand Jury, because it was the Queen's Council. The English were in charge of the law in Ireland at the time. So a month later, the Grand Jury met, and they had to make a decision about what they were going to do with this money that had been bequeathed to them. And they decided what they would do, that they would build a bridge over the ford at the spot where the Baka Rua used to sit. And so they did. 1 year later, a fine bridge of 9 arches was built on the spot where the Baka Rua used to sit on his stone, Clucka Baka Rua. And it is still there to this day. And local people call it the poor man's bridge. Now, not a lot of people know that story, even though it was collected by a man called John Keegan. But it is said that sometimes on a moonlit night, a figure is seen walking over that bridge, and the sound is heard of the wooden leg. The Baccarua is searching still for his money.
Brilliant job, Nuala. Thank you. I actually do remember that story from your time in Laois. Stories like that, they don't leave you. I just love it. And I was sitting smiling because I was looking at Madeline McCulley listening, because I could see her mind, like my mind, going to a story she tells about Stumpy Spray with a stump, 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 a man who's killed and his legs cut off. And the similarity was there. So thank you, Nuala. That was a wonderful story and just right for the occasion. I'm putting in the chat again our donations button in case anybody's enjoying the night so much they want to support Storytellers of Ireland. Would love to hear from. If you were from Ireland, you'd know I come from a place called Ballymena. We're supposed to be mean. We're actually just quite thrifty. So I put that in there. So from now, we're heading up north again. We're heading to way up north to Derry, to the city of Derry. And we have Madeline McCulley, who's going to share a story with us. Madeline, lovely to have you here.
Thank you very much. Well, I had an early start this morning because it's the spring equinox. And this is the day when there's more light than darkness. There's actually 4 minutes more light today than there is darkness. And our choir were singing at the dawn at 6:30 this morning. So I was going to tell a story, but I'll tell one that actually brings in the difference and how close we are at times to the other world. I mean, we're so mystical in Ireland many times, and there are occasions during the year at the equinox and at Samhain where the other world comes very, very close. And this is a story about, I'd heard it, I think it's a 7th century story from Bede and Caedmon. I heard Betty White, a Scottish storyteller, telling it. I heard someone who's on tonight, Jane Dorfman, telling it. And this is my version of it anyway. Well, there was a young man, Porrick. And Porrick, his work was to cut sally rods from willow trees. And these were woven into creels where farmers could buy them, and they would put turf in them, put the turf, the creels on the donkeys, and bring the turf home. They were used also for making baskets. And when he left the workhouse, he needed something to do, and he thought that there were plenty of sally rods around. But you know, there was a finite number of them. And he went out one morning and he realised that he had cut really all of the sally rods in the area that he was, and he wondered what could he do. He would need to earn some more money, and he searched around, and he walked along the riverbank, and across on the other side he saw a whole grove of willow trees, and he thought, if I could just get across there, if there was a bridge across there, I could start cutting those. And he walked along another little bit, and there was an old woman sitting there, and she stopped. Where are you going, young man? And he said, I'm thinking if I could cross that river, if there was a bridge, I could go over and I could cut some sally rod. And he said, oh, no, 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 he said. She said, don't do that. She said, because I'll tell you what, she said, that's an enchanted place. And if you go over there, people have disappeared. You could be kidnapped by the little folk. You could enter the other world. You might not get back again. I would advise you not to go. And he said, but I'm going to go there. I don't care what you say. And she said, well, here you are. Take this with you. And she handed him an iron nail for a horse's hoof. And she said, would you put that and hold that in your hand, because that will make sure that you get back again. And he looked at it. And when he looked up, the old woman was gone, and there was a bridge across the river. And he walked across, looking right and left. And he went in and he started to cut the sally rods, and he tied them in a bundle. And he sat down, and there was a well there, and he put his hand down, trying to cup up some water. And suddenly this whirlwind went round and round and round, and he wondered, what has happened here? he couldn't stop. It was twirling round and round, and then he was dropped suddenly in front of a cottage. Lovely cottage. And though it was not summer, but there were so many flowers and roses and all around the door. And the door opened, and there stood a woman, friendly looking, a big smile on her face, twinkle in her eye. And she said, "Come on in," she said. "I think that we've been waiting for you." So he went in, and he looked around, and there was the old woman's husband. They sat down and said, "Would you like something to eat?" And before he could say yes, there in front of him was the best meal he had seen for years. And he gobbled that up as quickly as he could. And the old man was smiling at him. And once he finished the meal, he did not lick the plate, I have to say. Once he finished the meal, the old man said, "Well, now," he said, "now you can tell us a story. Because it's the tradition that if you get a meal, that you return the hospitality by telling us a story." And Porrick said, I don't have any stories." He said, "Oh, come on, everyone has a story to tell." He said, "No, I'm sorry, I don't know any stories." He said, "Well, where have you been all your life?" He said, "I've been in the workhouse." "And what did you do in the workhouse?" "Well, we worked. It was a workhouse. But we didn't tell stories." And he said, "Oh, well, that's it. Well, you'll have to do something, you know." And he could swear that he saw the old man wink. And the woman said, will you take that bucket and take it down to the well, and would you fill it for us?" And he said, "Gladly." And he lifted the bucket and he went down to the well and he put the bucket in and he looked in and he took a drink, and it was the sweetest water he had ever tasted. But that whirlwind came again and whirled him round and round, and he found himself up in the air, didn't know what was happening, and he was dropped very, very gently in front of another cottage. But it was dusk, and the light from inside, the candlelight, shone out, and he could hear a lot of talking. And then this beautiful young woman, she came to the door and she said, "Come on in, we've been waiting for you." And he looked around. "Waiting for me?" "Yes, we've been waiting for you. Come on in." She said, "My father's wake is on." And he went in, and there was a coffin in the corner. And he looked. Everybody was looking at him. And the young woman said to him, "Well, now," she said, "I'm so glad to see you, because we've all done our talking, and now it's time for a wee bit of music." And she handed him a fiddle. And he said, "But I've never played a fiddle in my life." "Ah," she said, "Porrick, don't let me down." And she handed it to him, and he didn't know how, but the fiddle fitted very comfortably on his shoulder, and he took the bow and he started to play, and he played jigs and reels. He couldn't believe it. He had never lifted a fiddle in his life. And then he played most of the night. And then the woman touched him, and she said, "You know," she said, "it's coming up to midnight. It'll soon be the time for the priest to come in. So would you play a lament?" So he played a beautiful lament. Oh, so sad was it that people had tears in their eyes running down their cheek. And then she said, "Thank you very much," she said, "Porrick, that was wonderful. Now will you say mass for us?" And he said, what do you mean, say mass? I'm not a priest. I've hardly been to mass in my life." "Oh," she said, "Porrick, don't be letting me down now. Come on, say mass." And she brought out the chasuble and the robes, and she brought the stole, and before he knew it, there was the table was laid as an altar. And he started off in nomine patria et filii et spiritus sancti dominus vobiscum, and they all shouted et cum spiritu tuo, and the Latin flowed from him. And before he knew it, he was wailing his way through that mass. Latin, absolutely fluent in Latin. And it came to the end of it, and she said, "Now, Porrick, you've done a great job. You've done a terrific job. Wasn't he the wonderful priest?" And everybody clapped. And she said, "Well, now," she said, "it's time for the pallbearers." Well, he thought, that's my job finished. I can sit back. And up jumped 3 pallbearers, all just average size. And then this big, tall, lanky one stood up, and she looked at, and she said, "You're too tall. I can't have my father carried out, not balanced. I mean, the coffin could fall. Porrick, you better do something about this. Would you shorten that man?" And he said, but how can you shorten him? Well, you could cut off the long leg and sew his foot back on again. And but I'm not a doctor. I'm not a surgeon. I couldn't do that. Oh, she said, Pádraig, don't be letting me down now. Don't be letting me down. And the man jumped up on the table, laid out flat, and she handed him a saw and a needle and thread. And he went over and he measured 6 inches up, and he measured the other men. Well, 6 inches should do it. And he cut off the leg, and he cut off the foot, and he took the part that was done, threw it to the dog, and then he sewed the foot onto the leg again. And the man jumped off the table. They lifted the coffin, all 4 of them the same size, and they walked out the door. And as they walked out the door, Pádraig following, that whirlwind started again. Whoosh, whoosh, whoosh. And he was up in the air again. And then he was dropped down right in front of the door of the first cottage that he'd been in. And the bucket of water was at the door. And he lifted it up and he went in. And the man said, well now, Pádraig, do you have a story to tell us? And he said, oh, I can't tell you what happened. I mean, it's just amazing. It's magical. It was terrible, but it was wonderful at the same time. And he told them everything that had happened. And the woman said, well now, Pádraig, you have earned a good rest in bed. You go in there and you lie down. And he lay down on the softest bed that he had ever lain on, and he fell into a sound sleep. But he woke up very cold in the morning, and when he opened his eyes, there he was, right beside the bridge, on the side that he had started off with, and he had the bundle of sally rods there. And he made his way to the nearest town, and people were gathered there, and he started to tell him this fantastical story of what had happened to him, and people gathered round, tell me more, tell me more, tell me more. And there was somebody from the big house there, a servant, and she said, I'm going to tell the master about that. And she went home and told the master. The master insisted that Pádraig should come up and tell that story. And from that day on, he went from big house to big house, telling that story and gathering more on the way. And it said that he became one of the greatest Shanachis in the whole of the island. So Sin and Scale.
Perfect. Thank you, Mahu. Thanks very much, Madeline. That was great. And it's lovely to hear different versions of a familiar story. As usual, you make everything your own. So thank you very much indeed. So we're going from Ulster, we're going away over to Connacht. We're going to County Galway. We have Maureen McLaughlin, who's here, whose first language is Irish. And as usual, Maureen usually tells her stories bilingually. So, Fáilte, welcome, Maureen. Where are you at? Let me see where Maureen is.
She's on mute there, Liz. Just maybe, Maureen, turn on your mic.
That's it. Thank you, Orla. No. Maureen, we have you muted.
Still hasn't heard, Liz.
No. Maureen, you are muted. Where is Maureen? There you are, Maureen. Ask to unmute. Maureen, stop. We can't hear you. You're muted.
Now, can you hear me?
Oh, yes, perfect. Maureen, thank you very much.
Sorry about that.
No
I don't know what happened.
Ah, sure. We're all friends. Here, off you go. Thank you.
I'm going to tell you a story of the 5 bridges that connects the islands to the mainland in Connemara. Tá ceantar álinn in níorar na Gaillimhe a dtugann siad na Hileán Orb, agus tá chúid braid I ceangal na Níleán sin. There is a beautiful spot in Connemara, the very west of Connemara, and they are called the islands, and there are 5 bridges connecting those islands. Inis táigiúna Drahitse hartar céad go léir ag deireadh an naoú stéig agus tá siad an óchrinn. Those were built in the end of the 19th century and they're still there. Ach tá siad difriúil inne seachas mar a bhí siad fado. Mar fado Siad a bhí antap ná dréid a bhí dínta as ámuid go bhhétaí the Uscailt. Long ago, up to the 1960s, those bridges, they were drawbridges. They were able to be opened. Agus an tam sin bhíoh muintir áran bhí dí se brathead bhádarí an na mara le múna thuirtaisteach acu. Agus bhíoh múna teachtasteach as chuirichéantar ag an na mara go háireann. Back until the 1960s, the people of Ireland, they were depending on the fishermen or on the boatmen to bring turf from Connemara to Ireland. And of course, they brought it on the boats by the sea. Vi móna alisteach as cancer here nos carne kilhéran agus rasmok. Agus vi arab sin vech eshter father marach na dreidsha. Now the people from Carna, Kilkerran and Rasmok, they used to bring turf to Erin, and they would have to go all around the bay to bring the turf in only for those bridges, because it was a shorter journey to go through them bridges. Now, Nahilon, dús sálar a hen dreidan, nira dreidig testad. Blianta fada mar bhíochtaíine i siúl na bhí an tíide mob mar bhí chuide go na Hillan gar á chéile. Some of those islands, at one time, they were near enough so that people could cross from one island to the other. Ach ní rá gá go riine galwad an tam sin, mar ní bhí go testar bhób sa siúpa a bháin ará a bháin im agus siúcra. Agus plúr agus alla le hain lampa. People didn't have to walk far back in them days because all they had to get was flour, tea and sugar and oil for the lamb. They had everything else themselves. Achadenos I'm getting mixed up when I see everybody in front of me. I'll keep thinking. I think I'll keep going in English if you don't mind, because I'm finding it hard to go from one to the other. But anyhow, the islands, as I said, they have 5 bridges, and every bridge, I suppose, had their own story. And I remember the last bridge that was a drawbridge. It was about 1964 or so, or about that time, that they built a new bridge to it. That they built a new bridge, like it wasn't a drawbridge anymore. It was made of cement or whatever that's in the other bridges. But anyhow, there was a woman who lived back there. She was called Sauni Huliwan. And she had to cross a bridge one night. She was coming home from Galway after being in at the fair or whatever she was doing in Galway, because all I heard about that she was bringing home with her was a plug of tobacco for her husband. And she was coming along late at night, and she was passing this place that's called All Nagrai. It's a big, huge rock that's still there, and it's in a place called Castle. She would be about 6 miles away from her home. And the next thing, didn't this big rock open up, and 2 fairies came out, and they brought her into the rock, and they gave her the job to go washing corpses. Agus bhí Sauni Huliwan, bhí sin níchan corpus a piece of fada go lí go dtí go washi tursha. And Sauni Huliwan, she started washing the corpses, and she went on for a long time at night until she really got very tired. Agus she's in truth, agus dúirtí na hintin hain, is cummerlum cat the harlos ní mar le díal tadella. Agus dúirtí le na siógaí, Dún corbaile a níos Sauni Huliwan an nocht. She sat down there and she said to the fairies, Divil another corpse would Soundy Hooliwan wash this night because she was too tired. And Sin brooke siad ag Howni Hooliwan agus chaisiad amach a ríist as a gardaí. And two of the fairies got hold of her and they threw her out on the road. Agus chaisiad and pieces of tobacco amachchan in dia, and they threw the plug of tobacco out after her. Agus bhfuil saki cén fág an jarna siad sin. Mar go bhfuil na fáiltis ag na siogaí ri bheith anim in dail agus aca ri bheith anim dé. And I was told that when I asked the question as a child, why did the fairies throw her out? I was told that the fairies are as much afraid of the name of the devil as they are of the name of God. Agus sinna fá. Sinna scéal Howni Hooliwan as Annachleon. That is the story of Sauni Hooliwan. She comes from Annachleon. And that is the first island of the row of 5 islands that's in the islands in Connemara. It is called Canternillan, the island district, and it is a place where there isn't much work. There is still a lot of immigration, but it is a beautiful place. It's full of culture and stories and the Irish language. Agus sinna méid tá me gal rán nach. I'm sorry I got mixed up altogether and I'm not very good tonight. Forgive me.
It's wonderful to have you with us, Moihu. Thank you so much. And you know something, for the people that are all around the world listening, it's fantastic to hear our native language being spoken by a true tradition bearer. So we're very grateful for you to join us from Connemara tonight. Thank you very much. Thanks very much indeed, Maureen. Wonderful. Oh my goodness. Now we're going down the country again. We better take the spotlight off Maureen. She's in the spotlight here. We're going down the country a bit because I talked to you about how we're a very diverse population. Our next storyteller was actually born in Germany, but she lives in Ireland. She came as a young woman to be my apprentice. I was a very lucky person, and she has married and has got a lovely wee boy and is living down in Tipperary. So would you please welcome Simona Schimmelfeder?
Thanks very much, Liz. Hello, everyone. It's wonderful to be here and happy World Storytelling Day. As Liz said, I moved from Germany to Ireland about 12 years ago. And then about 3 years ago, I moved from the middle of Dublin, from the Liberties, to Tipperary, to near Borrisoleigh, between Nina and Turles. And that was quite a jump from cultures for me, once jumping from Germany into Ireland and then jumping from Dublin to the middle of Tipperary. And I was very much welcomed into the community that is here. And just today, I was driving down to Templederry, and there is a bridge that goes over a lovely little stream. But that bridge is not built straight. It is actually like an S. It's one of the worst bridges to drive, especially in winter when you get black ice down there. So as I was driving down there, I was thinking about our theme about building bridges, and I thought that if you take it metaphorically, and look at building bridges between people, sometimes I think bridges would look more like this Templederry bridge than a straight bridge, because sometimes we go around the corner to find each other. And that's a little bit what my story is about today. I would like you to imagine a time, or maybe just remember a time when you felt lonely. Now, maybe not lonely when you were at home alone, or sitting on a bus alone or something, but maybe remember a time when you felt lonely, even you were surrounded by people. I think we all had that experience. And I want to tell you a story about a young boy. Now, he might be maybe 12, 13, that age when You don't know who you are or what's happening. And he had just moved town and he was in a new school and he was walking into a classroom with full of strangers. But worse, those strangers all had their friends made up all together. And here he was, lonely. And he made a big mistake. He tried to make friends on that first day way too hard. Now, if you ever encountered somebody who's maybe telling a joke at the wrong time, or telling all those cringy jokes where you tell a joke and there's just silence afterwards, that would have been that boy. And he did it for weeks and weeks until he was known as the weirdo. And he tried then to play football, even though he couldn't. He tried to connect in any way possible, but he couldn't. And after a good few weeks, that boy gave up. He didn't try to make friends any longer. He was used to sitting at the table on his own. He was used to standing in the yard in the corner and just pretending not to not to care or not to be bothered by being on his own. And one day, on top of everything else, he missed a bus. Now, his bus only came every 2 hours, so he had to spend 2 hours in town. And he had heard that there was a new restaurant had opened up. And he thought, well, I'm quite hungry. I might go and try out this new restaurant. And as he walked up to the restaurant, he could actually already smell the spaghetti with meatballs and tomato sauce, and the water was running in his mouth, and his stomach was grumbling, and he pushed open the doors. And they had this board up where they gave all the prices for the food. It was €4 for a plate full of spaghetti with meatballs and tomato sauce, and he had about €3.90 in his pocket. So not enough. But he had enough money for a lovely bowl of vegetable soup. So he ordered vegetable soup, and there was a lovely woman behind the counter who gave him an extra bit of a ladle and said, "Here you go, love." And he found that very nice. He smiled at her and he took that vegetable soup on the tray and he carried it as carefully as he could over to his table. He set it down and he was just about to sit down as well when he realized he'd forgotten a spoon. So he turned around and he went back to the counter where they have all the cutlery, and he was just picking up a spoon and turned back again. In those few moments that he had turned his back on his seat, another boy had sat down at his table. And worse, that boy was eating his soup. And now our boy called Paolo was, what kind of town is this? First, nobody wants to talk to me. Nobody wants to be my friend. And now they're stealing from me. Now, he did not know what to do. He took a chair and he sat down at the table as well. And with his spoon, he went and he dipped his spoon into the bowl and he started to eat as well, expecting that boy to go all red in the face and leave the table. But he didn't. The other boy looked at him, but he didn't say a word. He just kept on eating. And the two boys had a staring contest. They were staring at each other with their spoons in their hand, not breaking eye contact, eating that soup. Until soon enough, the spoons were scraping over the empty bowl, and Paolo leaned back. And he was still hungry. He only had half a bowl of soup in his tummy, but he wasn't so starving any longer. So he leaned back and he looked at the other boy and he thought, well, maybe that boy was starving as well. Maybe he didn't have any money and he saw his opportunity and he sat down to eat my soup. So maybe I saved his life by sharing my soup. Well, I don't really mind. If he says thank you now, that's fine. That's grand. So he leaned back, smiling. But the other boy did not say thank you. The other boy got up and left. And Paolo's, he steals my soup and he doesn't. Oh. Now he was expecting that boy to leave the restaurant, but the boy went to the counter. And what he did was he ordered a huge plate full of spaghetti with meatballs and tomato sauce. And he walked right back to Paolo and he put it right in front of him. And he pushed a fork to Paolo. And Paolo went, ah, I see. He does not speak my language. That's his way of saying thank you. But why did he have to steal my soup in the first place? It doesn't matter. So he sat down, and the two boys, starving still, they were eating spaghetti with meatballs and tomato sauce, with the tomato sauce going everywhere. And sure enough, even though it was two boys still growing, that plate was so big they couldn't finish it. And when Paolo was too full to even take one little more spaghetti, he leaned back in his seat and he looked at the boy and he grinned, and the boy grinned at him. And Paolo looked over his shoulder and he saw just behind the boy's shoulder a table with a bowl of cold vegetable soup. And Paolo went, "Oh, that's my soup." And he went as red as a tomato. And the other boy looked at him and he burst out laughing. He said, "Finally, finally you notice. I thought you were such a weirdo, eating my soup, not saying a word." And Paul was, "Oh my God, I'm so sorry." All he could do was get up and wanting to run out of that restaurant. But the boy said, "No, sit down, like you're the funniest guy I've ever met. What's your name?" And the two of them became best friends. And that's how you build bridges, even if it's embarrassing sometimes.
Vielen Dank, Simona. That was beautiful. Thank you. So it's something I would do, you know. Oh God. Anyway, lovely. Thank you so much indeed. And it's wonderful. Simona is also the Secretary of Storytellers of Ireland, keeps us on track. So it's wonderful to have her here telling stories as well. Now we're going over to the west again. We're going to Connacht. We're going to get two for the price of one, if you like. First of two, we have the wonderful Orla McGovern, who's also a committee member of Storytellers of Ireland. Welcome, Orla.
Thanks, Liz. Thanks a million. Hello, everyone. It's great to see all the faces tonight. I better talk fast because I'm splitting it with Galway upstairs and Galway downstairs. So we have the 4 provinces tonight represented in our tellers. And within those provinces, of course, there are the counties. And I would argue that perhaps each one has its own individual accent. Just remember that fact. And these counties can be divided along lines that are natural sometimes, like a lake or a mountain range or a fast flowing river, perhaps with a little stone bridge across it between the counties. But you could say that there's often healthy rivalry between the counties in Ireland, be it a sporting rivalry or a cultural rivalry or even that of the scenery. For example, up to the north of us here in Galway, we have the gorgeous County Mayo, where Fiona lives, where my grandfather is from. And down across the bay to the south, we have County Clare. If you look across Galway Bay, we steal that scenery from County Clare. It's the burn. It's the jewel in the crown. It's this beautiful limestone landscape that looks a bit like the surface of the moon. And there's plants growing there that grow nowhere else in the world. And people come from all over to take pictures in the burn, and ecology experts go there. And one of the things they come to see is the wild goats, the big hairy wild goats, the gower of the burn. But I'm going to tell you a secret tonight, and I know there's only a few of us here, so you have to keep it to yourself. Those goats in County Clare are actually Galway goats, and I'm going to tell you why. So many, many years ago, there was a gower, there was a goat living in Clare, and he was a very handsome goat. He was very coiffed and short-bearded and just very handsome. And he would graze around as usual. And one day he took a big bite out of the grasses and his face lit up with joy. He bit this plant. He'd never tasted the like of it before. It was a purple heather, a freach. And he looked everywhere for more of this plant. It was purple and tasted like honey and was just sweet and delicious. And he hunted it all the way down to the border of County Clare, all the way to the rushing river. And across the river, he could see some growing over in Galway. Now, meanwhile, coincidentally, very coincidentally, at the same time, there was a very, very hairy, wild, scraggly Galway goat munching his way through the grasses in Galway until he bit down on something. This was the most incredible thing. It was Sunaman Mina. It was a stone bramble. And this was scarlet berried and juicy and tangy. And he couldn't get enough of it. But it was rare enough, and he searched everywhere, down to the border, in fact, of Clare. And of course, he spotted some growing on the other side of the river. Now, there was only a tiny stone bridge connecting these two counties. And of course, goats being goats, they followed their noses, and the two of them went up on the bridge at the same time. "Let me across," said the Galway goat in his Galway accent. "Let me across," said the Clare goat in his Clare accent. And they kept at this because they're goats. "Let me across, let me across, let me across, let me across." And neither of them would budge. And goats being goats, they locked horns and they began to fight on this tiny little bridge. And of course, the two of them fell into the Russian River. They were lucky enough to get out. But the next day came and both of them had the taste of those delicious plants on their lips. And they went up on the bridge again. "Let me across, let me across, let me across, let me across." Knock horns. Straight into the river. And they were almost killed. And the third day came. And they were tired and they were bedraggled, but they still wanted those plants. They still wanted their favourite thing. It's like the two flavours of crisps, salt and vinegar and cheese and onion. Each one liked a different thing. And they went up on the bridge, and one of them said, and I think it was the Galway goat, said, "I'll tell you what, Clare goat, if you want to go across, you go across first. And when I've gone across, then you go across. And we won't be in the same place at the same time." And the Clare goat said, "What a great idea. That's fantastic. Why don't we do that?" And so the beautiful, hairy Galway goat stood to the side, and the coiffed Clare goat went over and started munching the heather, the freich, all the way up through County Galway. And the Galway goat went over to the far side, and they switched sides. And do you know, if you go over to the burn today, and you listen, you can hear them, and they're munching away. They're munching away in the Sunaman Mina on the beautiful bracken, and they're bedraggled and hairy. That's the Galway goat. But if you follow the layer of heather up into the mountains, up to North Connemara, the other side from Maureen, and you follow it up, there's some wild goats up there, but they're quite beautiful and handsome, Hollywood goats and coiffed. And if you sneak up behind them and you listen really, really carefully, you can hear them speaking in a County Clare accent. And that's my story.
Thank you so much, Orla. Thanks very much indeed. Wonderful. I love goats. I used to have one called Gruffy, named after my favourite story, The Three Billy Goats Gruff. So we're going to go to Galway upstairs now, are we? We are going to go to the wonderful Nicole Blue for a song. And again, Nicole didn't start off in this part of the world, but she's very much part of our storytelling community. Welcome, Nicole.
Thank you so much, Liz. Thanks a million. I'm going to sing a song. I hope everyone can hear me okay. I'm going to sing a song, and this is a newer song. I wrote it quite recently. And it's a song about reaching out to help someone. And I couldn't help but notice that if I'm going to try to show it on the camera, if you reach out and give that helping, a really strong helping arm, isn't that a bridge? I think that's a bridge right there. I think it's lovely. So this song is about that. I'm just going to sing away. I sit in safe harbor, watching through small windows, your sky's growing darker, the fire falling so close, cold hearts growing harder. I see yours is breaking, adrift in the water. Your ship's for the taking. What can I do but offer a peaceful hand to you? What can I say but that I will stand here every day, reaching out from the river to the sea. I follow the water, the river is churning, echoes of the slaughter. Your bridges are burning, your lights growing dimmer. Dark clouds on horizon, your hope growing slimmer, your soul like a lion. What can I do but offer a peaceful hand to you? What can I say but that I will stand here every day, reaching out from the river to the sea. I sing from my seashore in hopes you can hear me. One voice crying no more, 2,000s may carry. What can I do but offer a peaceful hand to you? What can I say but that I will stand here every day? What can I do but offer a peaceful hand to you? What can I say but that I will stand here every day, reaching out from the river to the sea.
Oh, thank you so much, Nicole. That was beautiful. Thanks very
Thank you
much
so
indeed.
much.
We're so honored to hear original music from you. Thanks very much indeed. Do you know, I am so proud of the storytellers on here tonight because we gave them time scales to stick to, and we're absolutely bang on for our last storyteller. We started in Croatia with a Cork storyteller. We're now going to Cork for a Kerry storyteller. So Munster is well represented. Can I ask you all please to welcome Paddy O'Brien?
Yo, you can hear me, Liz?
Can indeed, Paddy. Work away.
Mighty stuff. Now, there goes your timetable anyway now tonight, so you know what I mean. Great night. God, great fun altogether. And as Liz just said there, fantastic talent. Now, The theme of the bridge, I'm going to take off the glasses because they're shining like mad. The theme of the bridge, well, the story I'm going to tell you now, this is a world premiere. It's not a world premiere of the story, but it's a world premiere of my version of the story. Liz, I was going to do it last night, as I told you, at the Gab.
Yes.
But I got asked to do the one about St. Patrick and the devil, because
well.
St. Patrick is kind of his week, you know. So
So it's
here goes.
good. This is good.
This is the first time this story is being told by me. So we hear of gold rushes and the gold rushes all over the world. We usually think of California, the Yukon, Australia maybe, but there were gold rushes in Ireland. But of course, like everything in Ireland, the gold rushes as well were a little bit more bijou than the ones maybe in other parts of the world. And one such mini gold rush happened at the end of the 18th century. It started in 1795. Now, I said at the start, there's no bridge in this story, but there is a bridge now in the place where the story happened, and the place is called Wooden Bridge. Look it up. South County, Wicklow. And there's a river there, a stream coming down the mountains, joining the Ockram River. I've been doing my research, but I'll have to do a bit more. And the next time I tell this, I'll have more detail. But the river is now called the Gold Mines River since that time. Now, that gold rush only lasted about 8 years, 1795 to 1803 or thereabouts. But anyway, a lot of people, the usual story, gold draws them in and you'll get rich fast, and sure, all kinds of people gather there. The bit of, when I looked it up, they said there was about 300 women there, and far, far more men, and even children as well. And it was at the start, it was a very amateur kind of an effort, because none of them had any experience. Now, there was a guy in the locality had been panning for gold there, nice and quietly, and he had the good sense to tell nobody. And he had been doing it for 3 or 4 years before that, and going to Dublin every now and again, and making a few bob, and maybe more than a few bob, out of the bit of gold he found. But of course, the secret got out, and the gold rush started, and the river before that was called, I'll try and remember this now, Awa Onatin Vocht. And Awa Onatin Vocht, beautiful Irish name, means the river of the poor furs, or the poor whin. The river of the poor whin. And I thought there's a lovely connection, because furze bushes have golden flowers on them. So there was gold above the ground as well, below the ground. The gold rush started anyway, 1795, like I said. And after a while, the men, mostly men and women, but the men that got affected by the most important ingredient of the story, they'd be digging along beside the river. They kept working beside the river, because then they had a place to wash out the dirt, to try and find the little bits of gold in it. Now, they were very small. There were very few sizable nuggets there, so it was mostly gold dust. A lot of work in getting that. And after about 6 months, a lot of the men working along both sides of the river, and of course it stretched. It was first come, first served. You could stake your claim, as they say. But a lot of the men that were mining for the gold there, digging for the gold really, they noticed that their hair started falling out. And sure enough, not all of them, but a good percentage of them, about 2/3 of the men digging for the gold, their hair thinned, and then they went bald. Now, scientists, after looking back on that, the boys, nobody knew what it was back then. They didn't know, was it witchcraft or voodoo or whatever, but they think it's a thing called selenium might have been in the soil there, and it can affect the follicles of your head. But anyway, the men were going bald. The miners were going bald. Now, a lot of them didn't care. They were digging for gold. But of course, like Orla's goat a while ago, the very well-groomed goat. Some of the men, like, they liked the look of themselves and they didn't like this development at all. And down we go to Waterford City now, down by the south coast. And after about a year of the gold rush in Wicklow, word reached Waterford that the gold rush was on and some lads were getting gold and a lot of lads were getting nothing. But a mad peculiarity up there, lads didn't guess, a lot of them were going bald. And there was a barber in Waterford. His name was J.J. Mullane, John Joseph Mullane, S.S. O'Mullane Oscailge. No, he was a very enterprising man. He had the barber shop, and he'd all, as well as cutting the hair of people, he'd have little products for sale. He was way ahead of his time. You could call him kind of beauty products, I suppose, for the men, and one of the things he'd been trading with boys from over in Brittany, and he got friendly with this French barber who sold him a recipe for tonique pellucare. I hope I'm saying it right now. My French isn't great. Tonique pellucare. And the tonique pellucare, according to the Frenchman, the recipe for this was guaranteed to regrow hair for people. By God, J.J. Mullane saw his chance. And he was living on his own anyway. His parents were long gone. He had no brother or sister or anything. He only had a small little shop. Now, he was always very knacky, like outside his shop, and he was an inventive kind of a man. He had kind of a mini windmill up over the front door of the barber shop, and 'twas spinning and 'twas moving a little puppet. And the little puppet had the scissors, Maria cutting hair, And he'd another one like that out in the back garden. There was a little stream going by, and he'd little water mill there, and he'd little dancers worked off that or something. So he was an inventive man. Sold up the whole lot anyway. He was kind of, he was Corahona, as we'd say, Oscailge. He was restless, and he said, now's my chance to make my fortune. He bought 4 mules. Now, he was a kind of a religious man, and to put a bit of a blessing on his journey, he called the 4 mules Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. And he loaded up the panniers, the baskets of the mules. He made up big pots of your man's recipe. The man from Brittany, I don't remember his name, with the hair tonic. Now, mostly he put in big jars of it and sealed them tight and put coarse bags around them and everything, so they wouldn't be rattling against one another. But he made one small section. He had about 20 narrow little bottleens, little flash keens of the thing, so that he could start selling straight away, you see, when he'd go up. And then he'd have more bottles and he'd be filling them up, etc. He was looking ahead like. And he followed the path of the Nore River. There were no roads much that day. So he followed north, the River Nore. They were all mentioned already tonight. It's amazing how many things that belong to this story were mentioned already. The Nore Valley up he went. I'm not sure of the geography of it now, but the next time I'm telling it, I will be sure, because I'll have researched it in the meantime. Up he went, and he turned east then, over the mountains and into the pass and down towards the hour on that in Vocht, where the gold rush was on, and somewhere near where the village of Wooden Bridge now is, he was crossing the stream, which is now called the Gold Mines River, with the 4 mules tied together in a train, as you'd call it, with all his precious cargo. And some disaster happened. Did a wasp go into one of the mule's ears, or did like a thrush or a blackbird or something shoot out of a bush and make a noise? But something spooked the first mule, and he threw the head all together and started running. And of course, when he had started running, the rest of the mules, they were all tied together, and poor old JJ couldn't hold them, and they went running up the side of the hill, and all the baskets got spilt out, and all the bottleens got smashed to bits. JJ had hired a man to mind him, because he knew a man called Depoyer, a good Waterford name to this day, Power, they'd call it down there now, Power, if they were saying it like the Waterford people say it. So Depoyer, anyway, eventually rounded up the mules and brought them back to JJ, but the baskets were empty. And the player was shaking his head, and JJ was shaking his head, but he was so far gone now, he said he may as well go on. And he settled just below where all the action was going on, all the gold, or not gold, was being found. And he set up a little shebeen of a barber shop right beside the stream, so he'd have a supply of water for his cooking and his washing and whatever. And it was going on like this. And of course, like I said, there was only about 1/3 of the men still had hair on him. So the pickings for a barber were poor enough, but he was just about pulling the devil by the tail for about 6 months. But at the end of 6 months, he was clipping one lad's hair all right, one of the local men who had a few bob and had a head of hair still. And when I would look out the window of the little hut that he built and the stream flowing by, into the kind of a dark old grey kind of a day now. But sure enough, he looked, he thought he saw 2 trout in the small pool. But he said, I'm imagining things, they look like hairy trout. There was hair growing on the trout. So he was looking out for it the following morning. He got up early, made a mug of tea, and he sat down beside the stream, and he walked along the stream. And every pool he looked into, there was a few ordinary trout, but there was a rake of hairy trout. He never saw hairy trout before in his life. And eventually didn't the penny drop. Oh, God, to see my hair restorer, of course. The tonic belliqueur, and he had in the small bottles, he had 3 big, he was advertising in 3 languages, French, English and Irish. Tonic belliqueur pour un fault father farshing, that's a big, long, wavy mane of hair. Buy one, get one half price. I told you he was very modern. And he realised that his hair tonic, he gave a kind of a wry laugh. My fortune has gone to the throat, he said. My plan is gone, all my hair tonic, and I have no recipe with me. He was after losing the recipe, and he called the boy and he said, do you see what's after happening? And the two of them had a good laugh. But the next day was sunny, and he was shaving a lad inside the window, and with the sun shining on the hairy trout, JJ looked out, the barber, he looked out, and he thought he saw a glint, a shine inside in the... And when he said nothing, and sure enough, he looked again, and there was some kind of a little sparkle in the hairs of the trout. Out he went quietly, said nothing to no one. And he looked into the pool, and he rigged up some kind of a basket of a thing to trap the trout. And he caught a trout, and he looked at him, and in lodged in among the hairs wasn't there gold dust. No, I told you that J.J. Milan was knacky. He set up a kind of an invention, a kind of a wheel in the stream that was spinning around, and 'twas catching fish, and without telling anybody why he was doing it, they all thought he was a fool. Every day he was catching 2 or 3 trout, and he was shaving them. And he had trout for breakfast, dinner and supper. But when he was shaving them, he then sieved the hair of the trout, and he was left with a little bit of gold after that. And himself, it must have been from being near all the lads, he was gone bald himself, and he didn't bother. He kept it up for 2 years, shaving the hairy trout and getting the gold out of their hair, and eventually he made enough money to return back down to Waterford himself and his buddy, well, his protector, De Poyer. Now, there's a couple of finish, I'm at the finish now, Liz, don't panic, but there's a couple of things about it that stand to this day. Like I said, the place is called Wooden Bridge. Now, if there had been a wooden bridge where his mules panicked, there might be no story. That's the first thing. The second thing, on the journey home, J.J. noticed that the Poyer had a mighty, shiny, long head of hair on him altogether. And he asked him, he put it straight to him, he said, you're not in trouble, but he said, did you get one of the little bottlines of my stuff? I did, says De Poyer, I'm sorry, I used it for myself. 'Tis all right, says your man. And De Poyer's descendants are living to this day down in the eastern section of Waterford, the eastern part of the county is where the De Poyer name, and they were known as the hairy De Poyers, De Poyer Gruguk, or De Poyer of the hair. And Milans, this is a pure coincidence now, lads, I wouldn't make this up. O Milan in Irish is the Irish for Milan. And O Milan literally means the descendant of the bald one. And one of the most famous O'Milans to this day is a hurler that played for Waterford called John Milan, and there's not one single hair on the top of his head. That's my story. There's no word of a lie in it. It's all well researched. Gurv Mila Mahagav, Slán Gafio.
Gurv Mila Mahagat, Paddy. Paddy, we must send you over to Texas. They have this Texas Irish competition, and I think you go down and treat, but thank you for bringing us in. And there's a lovely link to Wicklow, because that's where we're going now, because our chair of Storytellers of Ireland is Aoife Demo, and she's just going to come on and say a few words to us. She always says it'll just be a few, but I hope she does more than a few. Would you please welcome Aoife?
Hello, Aoife.
Thanks so much, Liz, and thanks for that lovely story, Paddy. My people are actually from Woodenbridge and Avoca, but I never heard mention of any gold, but I'll have to do a bit of digging myself, I think. I just want to say a huge thank you to everybody who's joined us this evening. What a wonderful, wonderful celebration of story. I hope you can hear me okay. I was giving this special gaming headset by my 15-year-old son. I'm feeling very techie altogether tonight.
You look very techie. You look
thank
really
you.
good.
Thank
Very
you.
cool.
What a great gathering of story in celebration of World Storytelling Day. So thank you to each and every one of you that have come on this evening, whether to listen to the stories like myself or to share a tale with us. We're really, really grateful for your company. I'd like to especially thank Daria for keeping the flame lit with World Storytelling Day Ireland and for her contribution at the start of the evening tonight. So thank you so much, Daria, for that. My big thanks on behalf of all of the committee to Liz Weir, who is our MC this evening, our Banantee. I'm sure you all agree she's an expert at this and we'd be completely lost without her. So thank you, Liz, for all the time and effort that you put into organising tonight and for hosting so wonderfully. Liz has also been dropping a little link into the chat there for donations. We are a charity, so if you are able, we would welcome your donations. If you don't catch it, it's actually on our website, which I'll pop in the chat. It's storytellersofireland.org. And you can read up on the organisation there. You can join our mailing list. If you have any questions, just contact us. Our contact details are on the website, storytellersofireland.org. And you can also follow us on social media on Facebook or on Instagram. You can join our mailing list free of charge and receive lots of articles and information on what's going on with storytelling across the island of Ireland. So that's my sales pitch there. So without further ado, just a huge thank you to everyone again, and I'll pass you back over. Thank you to all our listeners tonight, and pass you back over to Liz Weir to bring us home. Thank you, Liz.
Thanks very much, Aoife. It's been a pleasure. I've got a wee bit of voice left here tonight, but it's lovely to see many old friends. And thanks to all the storytellers for their stories and for their songs as well. And it's really lovely to have you all with us. I don't know if anybody wants to unmute themselves, say anything. Lovely to see friends who've been following us for a long time now online. 4 years we've been doing online stuff. So I don't know if anybody wants to say anything, but speak now or forever hold your peace. Just unmute yourselves. Could be chaotic, but it won't be.
Yeah. No, I would just like to once again thank everybody for coming, and thank you for such a wonderful evening. I'm just blown away. I couldn't imagine. And when I started this, I didn't think it would make it 10 years, but I was determined to give it my best. But I couldn't imagine a better evening and a better way to wrap this up. Thank you, Liz, and thank you every single teller. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Daria. That's nice of you. Thank you. Anybody else? There's Donna Marie.
Yeah. I'd like to say, God bless our
Donna Marie, our honorary Irish person.
And I truly believe that if the world is to be saved and have world peace, it will be on the tongue of the storyteller.
Lovely.
And God bless you all.
Thank you, Donna Marie. And I'm hydrating. I'm hydrating.
Me too.
Anybody else? All happy. All right. Well, listen, thank you very much, everybody, for being with us. Lots of opportunities online. Francis hosts Monaghan Yarn Spinners twice a month, I think it is, these days. Is it twice a month, Francis? I'm not quite sure.
Once a month.
Sorry,
online,
once a month.
And once in the real world.
I'm still doing every Saturday night for 4 years now. So thanks for those of you who joined us. there'll be some really nice pictures. We've managed to get some lovely pictures of the participants. Thanks very much. EOI, as they say in Ireland, night night. Thanks very much indeed to you all. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye, Mary.